Welcome to Santana True Crime. Tonight, I'm joined with my co-host, Allie Siebert. Allie, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Allie is the author of Bloodstained, and she also has a new show on Santana True Crime. It's Allie in the Archives, which that's going to be airing soon. We're really excited about that. I want to give a special thanks to my brother, Brian Santana, the professor. He helped us do research on this show and is going to on the other shows as well. You can support us if you'd like by purchasing our book, A Murder on Campus. I'm his co author. And of course, make sure while you're doing that, you're picking up a copy of Bloodstained as well. This case was brought to us or brought to the attention of us by a friend of mine who reached out to me. It's a case of Mica Miller. Mica Miller is a case from Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. We're going to dive into it in a little bit, but there's a lot of controversy surrounding it. It's a suicide case, and it seems pretty cut and dry. But as you dive into it further, you're going to see a lot of side stories and a lot of really weird coincidences. And again, this is something that a lot of conspiracies are popping up online. So I do think it's a very interesting case to cover. Allie, have you heard of this case before?
I have. I love a TikTok. So I will when it was happening, it was all over TikTok, and of course all of the conspiracies and everything were popping up about it. And I was fascinated specifically with a lot of the footage of the husband in church. I'm sure we'll
Yes.
get to that, but it's a bizarre case because you're right. On the surface, it seems really simple, cut and dry. But as soon as you start digging in, it's very obvious that there is a lot of things at play here.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I found fascinating about that as well. And my brother, again, you can follow him on at True Crime Professor is his IG handle. He actually applied for the records request for the local agencies as well as through the FBI because we know that JP is under investigation. And we do have the local files. So we will get into that in a little bit. I wanted to do something different though and kind of start from the day of the suicide itself. So we'll start with the first thing that we know happened, which is that she's captured on her Ring camera, and we've got footage of that. And this is kind of a dull video, but I think what's really important to notice is that it seems very ordinary. There's no one behind her. This is her kind of coming and going. We know that she leaves at 10:13 a.m. and she comes back at 11, and then at 11:38 she leaves again, and this entire time she's by herself, and this is her later at a gas station. Again, she's the only one in the store. And I'm saying that because there's a lot of conspiracies are revolving around that someone forced her to commit suicide or put the gun in her hand, and we're just not seeing that. The next video I want to go to is the she makes a stop at a Dick's pawn shop at 12:12 a.m. around lunch. And so we'll play that for you. And again, this is nothing out of the ordinary. There's clearly no one around her. Allie, have you ever bought a gun before?
No, I have not.
Okay. So when you go through the process, you actually have to fill out a lot of paperwork and they
Mhm.
do a background check on you right at the store, mainly to see if you're a convicted felon or not. but that process takes around 20 minutes. So this is not something that she's coming in and just grabbing impulsively.
Mhm. I will say, though, in those clips, if you look at her face,
Yeah.
especially the one in the pawn shop, she looks, and this is speculation because I don't know, but looking and comparing her face in the pawn shop to pictures of her that are online, she looks like she's been crying. Like, her face looks swollen, she looks like she's been through it.
Yeah, and I didn't notice that until you're pointing that out, and I think that that's kind of a that's a really interesting point. I always find it odd when people do commit suicide, the manner in which they do it, how some
Mhm.
of them plan and, the impulsive ones I can understand almost because it's a split second decision or a lapse of judgment.
Yeah.
Being a police officer, we've had Eric talked about this, in one of his earlier shows that we had a guy that committed suicide on our squad, and we also had a guy that committed suicide who was in the department, and with the first one, it was more impulsive because he was out of town, he got into a fight with his girlfriend, he was drunk, the police were called, he thought he was gonna get charged with domestic violence, and so
Mm.
he went upstairs, grabbed his pistol, and killed himself.
Oh my
Very
god.
not really planned, very impulsive, right? And then the next guy, I felt like there may have been you could tell he was going through some depression. He actually moved from Michigan, where you're from,
Oh.
and yeah, because his department closed down. And then one day, he got into an argument with his wife about wanting to move back to Michigan, and goes upstairs, grabs his pistol, and shot himself in the head.
Mm,
Yeah,
that's terrible.
it is. But in law enforcement, unfortunately, that's kind of common.
Yeah.
And with this, I can't tell. It just does not seem very impulsive. The fact that she's going through this after she leaves the pawn shop, she actually stops and gets. That's the video that was shown earlier, where she stops and gets gas and gets a drink.
I'm
These.
curious too, in the video where she's getting the drink and whatever at the gas station, the way that she's walking is also, it strikes me as a little odd, and maybe we can play that clip again, but it's like she's, like, kind of, like, swaggering around.
Let's look at
Um,
that
yeah. It's like when she's walking back from the drinks, there.
right there.
Yeah. And maybe I'm reaching, but she looks, yeah, like
And I don't
almost
know if that's
not
just kind of like
unsteady,
her
but
moping or
yeah, I don't know. I'd be curious to compare it to the video of her walking into the pawn shop because I'm curious. And then also it says, look at the drink she buys. Can we see what that drink is? Do you know?
I think it's like an energy drink from what the report said,
Okay.
which is kind of odd that you're getting an energy drink knowing you think about she has a gun, she has the
Yeah.
bullets, and she's trying to find a national park to go and commit suicide at.
Yeah. You wouldn't think you'd need a ton of energy to
Yeah. Well,
at the
here's the
last
really
bits there
eerie
of
part.
celebration.
We actually have the 911 call. If you can go ahead
Address
and
of
play
your
that.
emergency. Hi, are you able to trace the location of my phone? Um, let me see. You don't know where you're at? A national park. What's the phone number you're calling me from? Um, where's the park located at?
In Bear Bluff.
Let's see.
I have my location on, I think, on my phone. Find my phone is on. I just did my my location.
Okay, I'm showing. Hold on 1 second. I don't think you are in Robeson County. Are you at the Lumber River State Park?
Yeah, that's where I am.
Okay. Tell me what's happened.
I'm about to kill myself, and I just want my family to know where to find me.
Okay, ma'am. Just listen to what I'm saying, okay? Let me make sure I got the exact location where you're at, okay? Just 1 minute.
Yeah.
I think listening to that, it's pretty clear cut. But at the same time, you've got people that are actually analyzing that audio and saying that they hear someone in the background. Um, I've listened to the people kind of explain that, and honestly, I don't buy it. I think this is very clear cut that she's determined to kill herself, and she just wanted her family to find her body. What do you think about that?
Well, I think obviously she's saying she's going to kill herself. And it's hard to argue that. But I think that there are a lot of moving pieces happening behind the scenes. And I'm sure we're going to talk about those.
Absolutely.
But for starters, I know that she struggled with mental illness. Let's see. I have my notes here. I know that I don't know what it was exactly she was struggling with, and maybe you can help fill in the gaps for me a little bit. But I know that there was medication she was taking. Correct?
Right, and we'll hit on that in a little
Yeah.
bit, because I do think that that is the biggest piece in this case. To me, it's
Mhm.
very clear cut, and even if you look at the ME's report, which we have, so if we go to the ME's report, you'll see that's the second page. The front page is just um, her basic information, and it's got where clearly she committed suicide. And then it's got the diagram where the entry point is right above her right ear, and the exit point is just over her left ear. So that's consistent with someone putting a pistol to their temple and, killing themselves with a handgun from close range. Um, Everything else about the crime scene seems very consistent. Luckily, the Robeson County Sheriff's Office does a very good job with this case, as well as the North Myrtle Beach. And so, you know, we see so many cases where police departments just completely screw these up, and the conspiracy theorists have some legitimate grounds to be able to question what really happened. With this, I think that it's very clear cut in my eyes that she committed suicide. Now, the question that you were bringing up about the why she committed suicide and was there some nefarious things going on in their relationship and in her life? Absolutely. We're going to hit on that. But before I did not post this because it's just a letter from the Robeson County Sheriff's Office, but part of that records request that we got, they gave us a press release. And I'm not going to bore you with reading it because it goes through what we already covered. But the interesting thing about this is that after they found her body, the family members, where her immediate family, they had a meeting with, and they knew about the uh, divorce proceedings between Mica and John. He goes by JP. And so they decide to have a separate meeting. And you've got to remember that Robeson County is in North Carolina. JP is in South Carolina. So it's different jurisdictions. So Robeson County invited him. It says John Paul Miller was given the opportunity to attend a separate meeting, and Miller indicated through his attorney that he would not come to North Carolina to meet with investigators. I think that that's really odd. That, your
Yeah.
ex-wife or soon to be ex-wife, I don't think they were officially divorced by that time, kills herself. You're not even in the same state. Like, he was in South Carolina when this happened. He was around other people, so he should have had, there's no reason for him to not meet with the investigators.
Yeah. Well, especially a man who is going around and publicly declaring how distraught he is, how heartbroken
Right.
he is, how terrible and painful this is for him and his family, to not like do everything in his power to cooperate and be there is a
Yeah,
little fishy
I
to me.
find that really odd.
Yeah.
And so let's change gears for a little bit and look at why this may have happened, because I think that is the biggest part of the story and looking at her life. We know that in 2007, Mica and her family moved to Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. And we know in 2009, Mica meets John Paul. He's referred to as J.P. Miller, and he's a pastor of Solid Rock Church. And Mica at the time is 14 years old, and JP would have been 28 years old. And I don't know if they talked about this on TikTok or wherever you saw your clips, but it's widely reported that that's when the grooming started and that she was the favorite. And, not to spoil anything, but I think 14 is kind of his favorite age, it seems like.
Oh,
Um,
God. Well, yeah, and it's just like, I can't imagine any decent person who meets someone who's 14 years old and then later down the line sees them in any other way other than that kid I met when she was 14.
Right.
And he sees her in a way that he's able to then marry her and, all of that. So it's like, I don't know. I don't think I could separate that in my mind. Like, you were this 14-year-old kid, and that's kind of just who you are. Whereas that's not how his mind worked, which I think does indicate a little bit of grooming or something along those lines.
Yeah, and I completely agree. And as far as the age difference, it's one thing if one person's 40 and the other person is 54, even though that's a big age gap. The maturity level is kind of around the same part.
Mhm.
But when you're 14, I mean, what were you into when you were 14?
Like coloring and just like boys.
Not 28-year-old boys or
Not like
okay.
like the other boys at my middle school.
Yeah, okay. Gotcha. A and I would imagine when you were I mean, you're close to 28 now, damn.
Yeah.
Okay, right now,
Uh-huh.
I assume you're not, into 14-year-olds.
No. I can't even look at
Don't do anything for you.
like a 22-year-old without being like, "Oh my god, you're a baby." You know what I mean, though? Like, there's such a difference. It's like you're in 2 different, like,
Right.
phases of life.
Yeah, and at 14 too, that's just not even remotely close to having the maturity of an adult.
No, you're a kid. You're a
Right.
child. You're a
So
child.
this gets even weirder. At In 2012, Micah marries her first husband, which is John Paul's best friend, and John Paul officiates a wedding. And so I feel like this is probably his attempt to keep her close.
Mhm.
And I really feel like this church is you've got to remember this is in the Bible Belt where church is huge and you're a part of it kind of like it's like your own little community.
Yeah.
And so she's probably looking up to JP and believing everything that, you know, he says,
Mhm.
which is perfect for him when you're a predator and
Yes.
you're, you
Yeah.
know,
Well,
going
especially
after
when
14-year-olds.
exactly. Especially when he's held that role in her life for so long.
Right.
You know, she met him at probably a formative time in her life. She just moved to a new place. She was vulnerable. She was looking for guidance, I would imagine. Um, and he was able to fill that at that point. And I don't know that that ever goes away. That kind of looking at somebody in that light, like you're guiding me, you're a leader, you're helping me. I don't think that goes away.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And so surprise surprise things do not work out with her new husband and in 2015 Micah gets her first divorce and allegedly John Paul was having a affair with her during that time.
How old was
No
she at this
surprise
point?
there.
Do we know?
So Micah would have been 21 during that time and JP would have been 34.
Hmm.
So, I mean, I feel like he almost plans this whole, you know, thing out ever since she was 14 years old. It's like, "Oh, I'm gonna keep you close, and then once you get to age." I don't
Mhm.
know if the sex started before she got married. Like, did things start happening when she was 14 years old? I shouldn't even call it
Right.
sex, like rape or
It's good good
sexual
point.
abuse. That would probably
Mhm.
be a better word.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
Well, and
That's not
that's
consensual at 14.
yeah. And that's the question. Because even if it wasn't happening, like, physically, I think for things to get to the point where they did, there had to have been some sort of emotional thing going on.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So during this time too, JP actually writes a letter to his church seeking forgiveness for his actions and blah blah blah. And I'm guessing that the people buy into it, that they think that he's this changed person, but he doesn't go anywhere. Um, and so in 2017, Micah and JP marry. And so Micah would have been 23 years old at that time, and JP would have been 36. And JP has 5 children at the time.
Yeah.
So you're 23 years old and you've got 5 kids now
Mm-hmm.
that you're
Yeah.
helping to look after.
Yep.
Eh,
And I
I find
imagine sorry, I don't mean to interrupt
no,
you.
no, go ahead, please.
I was just gonna say traditionally in places that are very church focused and that sort of thing, um the gender roles are usually pretty pronounced. Not to say that it was anything, bad or anything. I'm just saying she was put into a situation where I would imagine she was expected to fill the role of mom, stepmom when the kids were around.
Right.
And I can't imagine jumping into that. Like that would just be so much responsibility and just exhausting. One kid would be exhausting.
Yeah. 5, that's a lot.
Mhm. Yeah.
So during this time, she starts taking a more active role in the church too. She's a youth leader, the women's ministry leader, and the pastor's assistant. So I think there's this whole buy in to this church community. And really, when I say she's buying into the church, she's really buying into him because he's the leader of this church. So what he says goes. And I think that's kind of part of the control that he's exerting over her. So in 2021, there's an alleged affair between John Paul Miller and Susie Skinner, who's a church member. And in 2021, Susie's husband is found dead in a pool. That's
Mhm.
September.
Now her husband was wheelchair bound. Correct? He I don't know if it was a car crash or what when he was younger, but I think that uh that led to that. But he like allegedly drowned himself from what I know, correct?
Yeah, and I think that you can take those things at face value, but then all these other things are going on, and it's kind
Mhm.
of like, did that really happen?
Mhm. Yeah.
That's when I start to question it is, okay, if he was the only person that killed himself, but it's like, man, all these people that JP is related to are killing themselves.
Mhm. Yeah.
Seems
It's
to, be something we need to look into.
yes. Absolutely.
Yeah, and so during this time too, there's a lot of which it's covered on in a lot of articles. There's a lot of domestic violence that's alleged, uh, that JP is abusing Micah. No surprise there. And I don't know if I was thinking about this the other day that I don't know if because Micah is now older, it's out of his time frame where he's like, I don't like 23-year-olds. I like them, 14 to
Yeah.
16 is his age. And so I don't know if that's why he's having the affair or
Mhm.
what's going on, but I definitely think that JP is the type of guy that, he's not looking for the long term. Like he wants a shiny object. And then once it doesn't become shiny like he likes it. He's going to move on to something else.
Mm-hmm.
But things are really bad in their marriage. In October 8th and 9th, Mica files for divorce. They'd been married for 6 years at this point. But Mica is still connected to the church, which, like I said before, is essentially JP. And she even goes on a mission trip to Kenya with the church. So I can imagine when she's on this trip, she's got people that are enablers and telling her that she needs to, who probably worship JP in a sense and believe everything that comes out of his
Mm-hmm.
mouth and are telling him how lucky, she is and give him a second chance. And what do you think about that?
Yeah, for sure. Well, especially when you have people like that who are so charismatic, like JP does appear to be very charismatic. I mean, he's a leader. He's up on stage, just he's got all of these people wrapped around his finger. You can't deny that he is charismatic. It does make it really hard when, I imagine that's not the person she gets when the doors are closed. I
Right.
imagine it's
Exactly.
not the nice, fun, cool guy up on stage. It's someone very different and maybe darker. And convincing other people of that when they've only seen the fun, bright, happy, charismatic, engaging guy would be very difficult. And I can't imagine that kind of push and pull, turmoil, like inner battle that she was likely facing at that point.
Yeah. And what's really interesting is while she's gone to Kenya, JP actually uploads a sermon on YouTube talking about his struggles with deep depression and mentioning taking lithium and experiencing suicidal thoughts. So, a lot of people that take lithium are bipolar. I don't think that that's a very, you know, big far fetch to say that he probably is bipolar.
Yeah.
And maybe that's why he's having these swings and mental health issues. So in December 24th of 23, he sells his house to Solid Rock Church. And I thought that that was really unique because it's like, okay, if you're trying to scam some money out of your church and you're trying to justify that on a tax form, that seems like a pretty easy way to do it, to say, oh, I'm selling my house to my nonprofit organization who's going to pay me probably more than my house is actually worth, right?
Mhm. Yep. Very
So he's
interesting.
got those financial difficulties we can assume he's going through, and he's also got the difficulties with his wife. I don't know if he's still having affairs that are going on, but this has got to be a lot of stress for Micah to deal with.
I cannot imagine being in her shoes at that point.
Yeah. Um, in February 8th of 2024, that is when Micah is involuntarily hospitalized at a mental health facility. And JP at that time allegedly removes her personal items from their shared home, including documents of abuse that she had collected and fraud that she had collected, which, again, we mentioned selling the house to the church. And he reportedly, which I've heard this from Micah's sister as well, she talks about it on several channels, where he locks her out of her Facebook account and then starts posting on her behalf, which things just are going downhill for her.
Yeah, that's really scary. And that's, I don't know, from the outside, just hearing that sounds like somebody who feels like he's losing control of somebody he had control of and is now grasping at straws trying to get that control back.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you hit it right on the head with that. Well, it works because in February 12th, Mica withdraws her divorce filing.
Hmm.
And on, February 13th, the case is dismissed because obviously she dropped it. But on February 15th, Micah's sister, again, she starts telling people that these text messages from Micah that are being sent out and Facebook posts are not from Micah. And so it really sounds like at this point that he's got full control of her social media. He's got full control of her cell phone. And so he's able to create this entire narrative himself
Do
and
we
make
know
this whole story.
where she is at this point? Is she just at home?
I assume that she's back, but well, she is back because she was only involuntary committed for 2 days, which
Interesting.
more or less sounds like she was evaluated than hospitalized. I know that process normally takes a few days for them because to go to a long-term facility, at least in North Carolina, you have to
Mhm.
have 2 doctors that sign off on saying that you're a danger to yourself or others. I'm sure that South Carolina has something similar to that effect, and then after those 2 doctors sign off on it, then you would go to a long-term facility for whatever uh, treatment plan they want for you.
Okay.
But with this, we know that she was only there for 2 days, so I don't know if the doctors found that, maybe they thought outpatient would be the best treatment for her, but it definitely didn't reach the point of having to go to a long-term inpatient facility.
Yeah. And those files are usually confidential, right? Mental
Yeah,
health things,
er,
yeah.
they are, so we know that February 22nd, JP files for separation and also spousal support from Micah,
Hmm.
which is crazy because Micah works for the church. I don't know if she has another side job, but this really seems like a power play on his part
Mhm.
where he's like, you know what? I'm going to, get this lawyer and take everything that you have. And I really think that he is just bullying her at this
Yeah.
point.
Oh, yeah. Well, it goes back to the control thing. I mean, he didn't want to be the one who's being divorced. He wants to be the one who's divorcing her.
Yes, and it gets worse. Again, he's using this church to control the narrative, and so on February 25th of 2024, he gives this sermon at his church about how mentally ill people, they don't know they're sick, and they must trust those around them, which is really ironic considering that not that long before, he admitted that he's taken lithium and having severe battles of depression.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's very it just speaks to, I think, where he's at. Like, it doesn't sound like he's doing well either. And yeah, I it just is all so messy.
Yes. And so he goes on some more of his rampages where he's talking to the church about how Micah took everything out of his bank account and abandoned everything. So he's basically turning that church against her, which, like we are saying before, like this is her community, the churches, and
Yes.
you're isolating her by removing that and turning people against you. He's removed her. I don't know if he is still controlling her social media or if she has access to a cell phone, but it's definitely a power play on his part.
And that's one of the hallmark signs of being in like an abusive sort of relationship, is when the other person is isolating you. They remove you from all of your support systems, so the only person you have to lean on is that other person.
Right.
And it sounds like that's exactly what's happening to Mica at this point, or happened. And at this point, she's just stuck.
Well, it gets worse for her. So March 11th of 2024, Micah reports to the county police that a razor blade was placed in her car tire. And she said it's the second incident that happened that week. And then a tracking device is also found on her vehicle by mechanics at East Coast Honda while repairing the tire. So, you've got, we all know this is JP, of course, who now he's placing a tracking device on her car and damaging her car. And so I think that when we're looking at the why of why she killed herself, and we go back till, when she was 14 years old, and of how everything has gone from this really controlling, manipulative life that she's led with this guy, and now he's starting to abuse her and take away every freedom, like being able to travel in a car and get away.
Yeah.
And so the next day, March 12th, a JP's request for spousal support is dismissed by the court. And
Good.
March 17th, this sermon is, he gives a sermon. And in the sermon, JP tells a story about a pastor whose wife left him, requiring a third party to locate her. He notes the pastor couldn't sign divorce papers due to biblical beliefs against divorce. And Micah's sister sees this and expresses concern for Micah's safety. And I think that this is where, when we're looking at this as a conspiracy, it kind of adds to it, because you've got this guy that's saying, like, oh, I don't believe in divorce. And it's like, okay, well, if you don't believe in divorce and you're not wanting to stay with someone, what are the options? You know?
He was married previously, correct?
Right.
Did he divorce that woman?
He did. Yeah. You gotta remember, though, he's crazy. Yeah. So these sermons aren't supposed to make any sense to anyone.
Yeah.
This is really him getting up there and just making up stuff and using the Bible to, abuse 14-year-olds.
Well, it's fascinating to me, especially that people sat through this and continued to sit through this and
Oh,
heard
yeah.
these things and still were showing up to church every Sunday. Like, can you imagine getting up or sitting down in church and having your pastor, whoever, talk about how like insane his wife is and how like all of this terrible stuff about his wife? I I I wouldn't even want like to overhear that, let alone somebody who's supposed to be like leading the church talking that way about his significant other. It just is shocking to me.
Right. And, it surprises me, but it doesn't surprise me, because there's so many examples of predators are in these organizations and use it to their advantage, and they're very manipulative, like he is, and they know what to say, and they know how to coax people into doing things. And when people are really religious and they are grasping on something that they believe is true, I think that this church community, they're probably eating every word that he says.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sure.
So Mica,
Especially if they've yeah.
yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, especially if they've been around a long time. It's
Right.
probably already they're in too deep.
Yeah, exactly. And so moving forward, in March 22nd, Micah posted a video onto Facebook discussing the abuse in their marriage, offering support to those people in dangerous situations, and questioning whether God is more upset about divorce or abuse, which I find
Mm.
kind of interesting
Mhm.
that she's still clinging on to this belief of, okay, God is going to almost give me the answer. But the problem is that the correlation between JP and God is so concrete that she's associating what JP says as God's word, which is, a lot of what Christianity is. You have a leader of the church, and they are supposed to interpret the Bible.
Yeah, exactly. And it's such a breach of trust when that person then isn't who they say they are and is doing all of these terrible things. It's just sickening to me.
Yeah, so shortly after that, she leaves the church and she finds another church. And then in March 26th, she finds another tracking device on her vehicle, and a magistrate summons is issued for a bench trial for the civil case between Mica Miller and JP regarding the restraining order. So that would be a violation of the restraining order would be that you put this tracking device on there. And then, again, these things are kind of giving the conspiracy theory um, some credibility when you're looking at all these things that just happen over and over and over. Um, so Micah is baptized into another church, Valerius Church in Little River, South Carolina, and that's in March 31st. And that's when things escalate again with JP, where April 8th, he starts posting nude photos of her on a Facebook group.
Mm.
So she's trying to move on with her life. She's trying to get that new church community that she values so much. And you've got this guy that is obviously stalking her
Mhm.
and not just driving by where she is, but putting tracking devices on her vehicles multiple times. And, she's going through tires all the times, it seems like, with the
Mhm.
razor blades. And so this is when um, Micah's sister tries to start reaching out to people and telling everyone that, John Paul is putting these false stories out there and trying to clear Micah's name. You've got Micah still, she's in this separation process with John Paul. A lot of the southern states, like here in North Carolina, you have to be separated for a year and a day before you can actually be divorced. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. So even if
Whew.
you're in a abusive relationship, you've still got to wait out that year, which is insane.
That's horrible.
Do you know what it is in Michigan? Not that
I
you're
have no idea. I guess I could look it up.
Yeah, I mean, it's
I'm
a
looking it up right now
state.
because I'm curious.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen other states that's like a 90-day period, but a year and a day, that seems extreme. And Micah, again, she's in this process. So it's not like she can just move on with her life which is making it so difficult because clearly JP has not moved on with his. And so they get a hearing for the separation, and it's scheduled for June 5th of 2024. And John Paul is officially served with the papers, which again is like part of this really long process. And that's when it leads up to April 27th, which is the day that she committed suicide. And so when I was looking at this, I thought, okay, JP is clearly a predator. Part of the letter that was sent to us in the files from the sheriff's office was it mentioned that the FBI was involved investigating JP Miller, but not in related to that case. And you've got to remember, even if JP killed her, murder would not be something that the FBI is going to investigate. And sometimes they will, they'll help out with serial killers or something like that. But just a regular murder that happens in a local agency, they are not going to investigate. And my question was always, well, like, what are they actually investigating? We're still waiting for that file, and when we get it, we will release it on another show. But I did find that civilly, we've had two Jane Doe, can't talk today. Two Jane Does that have filed lawsuits against him. One of them is alleging that he raped her in 1998 when she was 15 years old, and he was 19, working as a youth leader at All Nations Cathedral Church, which is in South Carolina. The lawsuit claims Miller lured her into his father's office and attempted to assault her, and then forcefully took her to his truck where the rape occurred.
Mm.
And so, when you're looking at predators, I think a lot of times we're seeing this pattern of behavior, right? Like they have a certain age that they gravitate towards, and usually they're doing things like for example, he's using his church as a means to be able to get access to these young kids and also be able to manipulate them into raping them or sexually abusing them or putting emotional distress on them or any other type of violence that he wants, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
And then the second lawsuit alleges, a similar thing where John Paul Miller sexually assaulted her in the late 1990s when she was 14 years old. Again, we see the 14 pop up while she was a student at Cathedral Hall Academy. So come to find out, him and his dad had this academy that was a renovated bowling alley. And they had, quote, teachers there that weren't even certified teachers.
Of course not.
Yes. And so now a lot of people are coming forward, and she's one of them, saying that, he not only sexually abused her, but these teachers would berate them for, doing things like reading Harry Potter, calling them like, a servant of Satan for reading it, and warning them that they would be raped by demons was another one of her quotes that she said was told to her. So,
Lovely.
we're seeing this justification
Uh-huh.
almost.
Mhm. And it's like, I don't know, it does raise the question of if that was going on, if they've got this church school with people who aren't qualified to teach, and
Right.
they're saying all these terrible things, and there's allegations of, sexual assault and rape. Like, what else has happened there that no one's talked about yet?
And
Like, these are
that's
just
where
the things that we've heard.
right. And that second one was filed in March of 2025.
Wow.
Right. And the thing about working with the FBI or any type of federal agency is that they have to go through the U.S. District Attorney's Office.
Mm,
So the they don't take cases to federal court that they think they're going to lose. It's not like district court where if I'm working for an agency and I see you shoplifting, I can just arrest you, take you to a magistrate, and you're charged right then. With federal court, the
yeah.
process is that you have to meet with a US attorney, present your case to him, and then he or she decides if they will adopt the case. And a lot of times it's, we're not going to take it yet. We want you to do X, Y, and Z first, or we want you to, have a little bit more, or your case don't get prioritized because, there's not many federal courts. And a
Yeah, no
lot of
kidding.
these US attorneys go on to either be politicians or judges themselves. So they don't want to lose.
Right.
And I'm hoping that that's where we're at with this case, where they
Mhm.
are building a case against him. And I really hope he goes to federal prison for a very long time.
Me too. Me too. It's tough because it's like, do I think he went out there and pulled the trigger? No. Metaphorically, do I think he pulled the trigger? Yes, absolutely.
Right.
Like, I think he pushed her to the point of needing to do that with, like, just just the base stuff of putting trackers on her car and isolating her from her entire community. Like, that alone would push a person. And that's the stuff, again, that we know about. I'm sure there's a million other things that we would be horrified to hear. And it's like, at what point do we say, yeah, doing that to someone to the point where they shoot themselves is essentially murder, you know?
Right. And I agree. I mean, I think that he killed every part of her, and she just was the one that put the bullet in herself and ended it.
Exactly. Exactly. I totally agree. Did you hear about and you can help me because I'm not nearly as familiar with this case as you are, but the witness, the only witness to her shooting, the only person who reported hearing any gunshot or cries or anything is a fisherman, and
Right.
he later died in a car accident. Is
I
that
did
true?
see that.
Yeah.
So I got which I need to give her a shout out. I don't think I did in the beginning. Suzanne from Oak Island, North Carolina, sent me this case because she was living in Myrtle Beach at the time and reached out to me and said, it just seems really fishy what's going on. I understand it's supposed to be a suicide. And that was one of the things that she pointed out as well. It just seems too clean, like too clear that
Mm,
this is a suicide. And especially with the 911 call, I mean, they've got a GPS of her location down to the meters. Her body was found quickly. The agencies, from what I've seen, did a thorough job with the investigation. And the fact that he was nowhere near that location, it's not like that was questioned either. Now, I don't think that makes him any better of a person that he didn't kill his wife, because
Mhm.
he really did kill her in every other way. And I do believe that he is probably guilty of raping and sexually assaulting several 14-year-old girls, since, that is his age of choice.
It does
But
seem odd though, because one death, it's like, okay,
right.
but we've got 3 of them
Yeah,
for
and
this.
that's what makes this story really interesting, is all these little rabbit holes that you can go down. It's people are, like you said, that's the third person in the story that dies
Mhm.
either by suicide or suspicious behavior.
Yeah. It's definitely odd. And it just seems I don't know. And I don't have any explanation for why that would be the case, why he would be killed, but it's hard to shake the um the circumstances,
Oh, no, I agree.
coincidences, I guess.
Yeah, well, do you have anything else you'd like to add about this case before we close it up?
I mean, I guess the lesson here, if there is one to take from such a absolutely horrific and horrible and tragic situation, is maybe the importance of seeking help if you are in a situation where you're experiencing domestic violence or abuse or anything like that. Um, Not that it is easy or anything, but people who aren't in that situation, making sure that you are a safe space for people to confide in, making sure that you are aware that this is happening. This is something that happens to so many people. And, um, just being open and normalizing seeking help.
A and I think that you've got it completely right, and I think that the problem in this case is that it started at 14 years old,
Mhm.
and I'm sure for a lot of her life, she didn't know what normal was and what real love was, and unfortunately, when you've got a psychopath like he is, who just has no moral compass and will do anything to get what he wants, he's willing to invest years of his life to be able to get that.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's a unique situation and yet it's not, you know? Like I think this happens way more often than people realize and it's not just women, it's men too. I think this happens all across the board and so for just the average person out there, I think being aware of it is the first step to maybe being able to help in those kinds of situations.
Yeah, I think you're right. All right. Well, on a good note, let's try to change it to something positive. You've got your new show that should be coming out on Thursday.
Yeah,
Do
I'm
you
so
want to tell
excited.
everyone a quick
Uh,
snippet about it?
yeah, so it'll be Allie in the Archives. New episodes will be coming out every Thursday. My very first episode comes out this week, tomorrow. I'm so excited. My first episode is about a man named Paul Austin. Paul Austin is a 30-something-year-old man who lives in Detroit in 1934. And one day he goes off to work and he never comes home. And later, there's a body found, but the circumstances are extremely suspicious and unlike anything I think you can uh, predict. So I'm not going to spoil it because it's good and I want you to listen to it. But it's definitely kind of a doozy of a case. So I keep telling people, get your detective hats out, get your little notepads out because you're going to need them to figure this out.
The fedora, yeah.
Yeah, get your little dusters out, your little whatever, I don't know. Just I'm just really excited. So, but yeah, it's an unsolved case, it's still unsolved today, and it's one that it's my whole thing is that I like cases, not that I like them, but I find them interesting, cases that have essentially been kind of wiped from the narrative. They've been lost to time, nobody's talking about them. Not that the ones that people talk about aren't important, but I think it's also important to shed light on things that people maybe have forgotten about, the names that we don't know, like Paul Austin. So this was the case with this one where it was front page news at one point in time. Everybody was talking about it. It was national. And then suddenly nobody's talking about Paul Austin anymore. And the question is why?
Well,
I know.
hopefully people will talk about our show, and that is going to be available on YouTube very soon, as well as you can follow us on Spotify and Apple, of course, anywhere that you get podcasts. So if you could, make sure that you like, subscribe, give us a rating, whatever you can to support us. Again, Allie, thank you. If you want to support Allie, another way that you can do that is to get her book, Bloodshed. It's available, or sorry,
Bloodstained.
Bloodstained. It's available on Amazon. And
You
we
got
still
it.
have copies of A Murder on Campus, a Professor the Cop, and North Carolina's Most Notorious Cold Case. So don't forget to get your copy of that. If you would like for us to cover a case, again, this one was given to me by a friend of mine. I haven't talked to her in a while, and it was really cool how she reached out and wanted us to hit this case. Please shoot me a DM, or you can DM Allie. My DM is Santana True Crime, and Allie is Allie in the Archives. Thank you again,
Yeah.
and we will see you next time.
Thank you.